My favorite story in the Bible is the book of Ruth. Now, it's a super short story, only 4 chapters long, and a lot of people refer to it as a love story, but I've always read it as a story of loyalty and redemption. But reading it in this past week, I read it in a whole new way. I saw faithfulness and trust, and it made me wonder, what kind of people do we become in hard circumstances? So first we meet Naomi. Now, Naomi has lost it all. First, her husband dies, and then both of her sons die. Now, in those times, being a widowed woman, you were considered pretty useless in society, especially if you were too old to get remarried or have children. So Naomi's life took a pretty terrible turn. Now, Naomi had 2 daughters-in-laws. The one, she went off, probably safe to assume she got remarried. We don't really know what happened to her. She's not mentioned again. And then there's the other one. And the other one decides to stay right by Naomi's side. Enter Ruth. So Naomi decides to go back to her hometown, and Ruth insists on going with her. So now we have 2 grieving, widowed women traveling to a new land, futures completely unknown. Now, once there, Ruth takes life into her own hands. Instead of sulking or waiting for some magical solution, Ruth took action. So back then it was law that when fields were harvested, they would leave the outer corners, and those were left behind so the poor people can come and harvest their own grains to feed themselves. So Ruth, in order to support Naomi and herself, she goes to the fields to glean the grains, which, by the way, was not easy work and probably pretty soul-sucking. Now, Ruth had some pretty admirable qualities, and she didn't let her difficult circumstances change that about her. She was hardworking, loving, humble, kind, loyal, brave, and people started to notice that she had earned herself a pretty good reputation. And it's that reputation that lands her into the arms of the wealthy, successful man named Boaz. Now, here's where the love story part kicks in, but we're not here to focus on that today. Anyhow, the 2 end up getting married, and they end up having a baby named Jesse, who, years later, has a baby named David. Yes, that David. Ruth and Naomi went through, well, hell. They literally lost it all, but you know what? It was just temporary. It was just a sliver of what God had planned for their future. God knew what was on the other side. The person Ruth chose to be during her hardship changed history forever. Her faithfulness, loyalty, trust, bravery, perseverance during her time of hell, it all mattered. And God did amazing things with her life. For some of you, this quarantine might feel like your own personal hell. You're stuck at home, missing friends and family, bored out of your minds. But don't forget that God has a plan for you. He knows what's on the other side of all of this. This quarantine is just a sliver in time compared to the big picture. You will get to the other side. The question is, who will you be when you get there? Ruth took action. She took control of the situation. She chose faith over frustration. She chose hard work over sulking. She chose hope in a hopeless situation. And here we are, thousands of years later, talking about her teeny tiny book in the Bible. So I ask you, who do you choose to be during this hell? Are you keeping your eyes on Jesus? Are you speaking life? Or fueling the fire of fear and anxiety? Can you trust what God has in store for you on the other side? Who will you be when you get there? Trust me, It makes all the difference.
Backtrack a little bit. I misspoke earlier. So Ruth and Boaz had a son named Obed, who then had Jesse, who then had David. We all make mistakes, right? Anyway, you still get the point. God bless you guys.